Hello! Welcome back to the Mario Kart DS monthly world record recap. That's right, we're actually making this a regular series. This month, there were 28 world records set on 11 different tracks. Of the 28 records, 19 were in PRB and 9 were in non-PRB. This month was quite busy for records, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Actually, before we get into our first record, I have a bit of a history to tell. Last September, the game's oldest record, Shroom Ridge 3 Lap, was beaten by Max after a reign of 4,054 days. It was one of only 3 records in all of Mario Kart to last over 4,000 days, and survived all the way through the 2010s. After it fell, the title of oldest record fell to the shortcut fast lap on Sky Garden, which was set about 9 months later in May 2010. Motivation to beat this record was low, however, so on April 3rd of this year, it took the title of oldest record and continued to rack up days. Enter Boreas, a top-tier old-school Wi-Fi player who came back to the community recently. Boreas was back and he wanted to take down the oldest record using the immense skill that he forged in the fires of Nintendo WFC. On May 2nd, he sniped Dasher's record by 2 milliseconds with a time of 18.755, claiming his first ever world record. Boreas took a slightly different line in the first half of the lap, driving inside the vine on the left side of the track. The real difficulty of this run lies in the shortcut. Most of the best players in the world haven't even attempted it, let alone on a good run. The driving in this run showed off how much overall community skill has increased in the past 11 years, and Boreas even hinted in his description that he could possibly get an 18.6 lap on a perfect run. But it wouldn't be Boreas to do it. 8 days later, MKDasher would come back to reclaim his record with a run of 18.695, a 60 millisecond cut from the time that Boreas set. This run incorporated the inside of the vine line that Boreas used and just had a cleaner cut and recovery. Dasher commented on the run, "Haven't played this category for ages, but my world record got beaten recently, so I came back to it. Strat is not too hard until the shortcut once you practice it enough. Shortcut, however, needs a really good alignment, and my success rate is super low. Part after the shortcut is really tricky as well. Can go lower, 0.5 at least. We'll keep playing a bit more to see how low I can push it." Dasher would come back at the end of the month to snipe a further 46 milliseconds off the lap with an 18.649. This run had basically identical driving, except he lost less speed after the shroom, which allowed him to be a little bit faster to the finish. On this run, he comments, "Bit better driving than last time. Still think 0.5 is possible, or even 0.4. I think it will be interesting to see if Dasher chooses to continue here and push this so long neglected category into the modern age of MKDS. Great stuff from Boreas and Dasher on Sky Garden this month. Good luck going forward." For many years, 2 records creeped closer to an elusive barrier. In 2010, Dylan got the first 143 on Airship Fortress. In 2014, Ben Stoneman nabbed 143 on DK Pass. Entering May of 2021, the record stood at 143.019 on Airship Fortress and 143.047 on DK Pass, just frames away from 142. Taiga would be the first to strike on May 5th with the 142.993 on DK Pass, a cut of 54 milliseconds from Marissa's record set last December. Taiga was on an insane pace into lap 3, nearly 200 milliseconds ahead of the record, but in a rare moment of fallibility, he actually appeared nervous and didn't drive cleanly on the final lap. DK Pass is a very challenging stage to drive well, and there are some key moments that can go right or wrong. These are the ascent, fence hop, S-bend, and final turn. The ascent up the mountain is by far the most straightforward of all sections on this track, but it shouldn't be overlooked. Your goal is always to stay tight and make sure that you don't miss any mini turbos or hit the off-road. The next spot is the fence hop. It cannot be understated how challenging it is to hop off the ledge, land cleanly, and charge a mini turbo before the next jump. Taiga even gets a little extra bounce in a wide line on lap 3. Your performance on the fence hop will affect how well the next section, the S-bend, and descent goes. For this part, you want to do a right-facing mini turbo or RMT, release it and steer left slightly, then hop at the right moment to start a left MT, which miraculously chains into another RMT, which allows you to snake the rest of the way down towards the big jump. Luckily, the pace that the world record enters this section on each lap doesn't encounter any trouble with the large snowballs, but they can certainly be a major pain for people on slower paces. The final turn has two big parts, the big jump and the snowman turn. You want to drive straight off the big jump, but start holding down and right in the air. This allows you to land into a right-facing slide where you can chain 3 mini turbos to round the fence as tight as possible. One last thing to note is the way that Marissa and Taiga approach the transition between laps. Taiga elects to do 3 consecutive RMTs, also known as mono MTs, whereas Marissa does an LMT and 2 RMTs, which is actually slower. Congratulations to Taiga for achieving the sub, and good luck going forward. I'd also like to give some good luck to Marissa if she chooses to return and retake her record. 10 days later, Beta would do the deed on Airship Fortress, lowering his own world record to 142.861, an improvement of 158 milliseconds. This run didn't do any one thing in particular so much better than the previous record, but just had a lot cleaner driving overall. I went over some key moments for this track in last month's review, but I'll do a more in-depth explanation here. The first thing to note happens right away at the start. Notice how when Beta's kart lands, it turns on its own. This is called a spin landing, and you'll see it employed by Beta when he lands from a jump. To do a spin landing, you simply don't hold a direction on the D-pad when landing from above, and the kart will turn on its own, and it saves a bit of time by cutting down on the time spent manually steering the kart. I'll point out each instance of a spin landing as we move through the lap. After we navigate the bullets, it's onto the ship, where, oh, there's another spin landing, where we take a tight line inside the rocky wrench hole. Next, Beta enters the inside of the ship with a string of LMTs, which sets him up to steer tightly around the hairpin turn. How tightly you take this hairpin turn greatly affects the time gained or lost. Next, Beta chains an RMT, and then starts an opposite-facing slide as he falls off the edge. Upon landing, Beta takes advantage of another spin landing, and charges his MT and proceeds to snake through the ship. Note that the fire bars will be in different positions on each of the 3 laps, but the same general strategy can be used on the cycles that the world record gets. After a fun ride in the cannon, Beta does a fast fall by pressing down on the D-pad and then steers left and hops around the spiral precisely to avoid bounces and stay tight. At the bottom of the spiral, Beta does a string of MTs which brings him to the end of the lap and sets himself up for the bullet pattern on lap 2. The driving is mostly the same for the next 2 laps except for slightly different cycles, but there are still some things to cover. Like spin landings, spin landings, spin landings, spin landings, spin landings, spin landings. Okay, let's get back to the run for real. On lap 2, Beta uses his shroom to cut off a bit of the hopping and steering at the end of the spiral. This shroom spot is the same if you're using the Egg 1, but you would also perform an MT during the spiral on the 2 laps where you don't shroom. Since Beta uses BLS, it would be much slower to perform an MT because of its wider steering angle, so just hops are used. GG's to Beta on his own 143 sub, and best of luck with the track you choose to play next. In last month's video, I hinted that Dasher will likely get the 3-lap record on Wario Stadium as well. Well, before I even finished the script for that video, Dasher already scored a new record of 148.536, a cut of 76 milliseconds on May 3rd. This run is basically the fast lap that I reviewed last month, but done 3 times. 'Cause, 3 laps, funny how that works. Regardless, I'll briefly go over what makes this run possible. After the first jump, Dasher uses his shroom to preserve his speed upon landing, though this is only applicable to lap 1 since you only have 1 shroom. On laps 2 and 3, the landing will be a little slower, but Dasher makes sure to level out his kart before landing to minimize time loss. Throughout the lap, he utilizes PRB driving by continuously mini-turboing to keep his boost across the mud without losing speed. Avoiding the big jumps by simply going around them saves quite a bit of time. At the end of the lap, Dasher does a tricky jump over the wall and out of bounds. This jump activates a checkpoint on the other side of the wall and respawns you there upon voiding out. If you press A with good timing upon landing when Lakitu drops you, you'll get a boost, which allows you to save the whole 1 second or so that this trick saves by not going around. This was a pretty solid run from Dasher, but absolutely nothing could prepare him or anyone else for what Taiga responded with on the morning of May 22nd. Taiga absolutely dismantled the record on Wario Stadium 3-lap with his run of 1:48.077. This run was a 3-for-3 BKS, or best known split, which means that he got the best lap 1, best lap 2, and best lap 3 ever driven in a run, all in a row. A feat like this doesn't happen often, but with Taiga, it's just another Saturday. The driving in this run was absolutely excellent, and this is a true masterpiece of Wario Stadium driving. Now, is sub 148 possible? Well, Taiga wasn't done destroying Wario Stadium, so on the same day, he set a time of 35.691 on the fast lap, cutting a sixth of a second off the time that Dasher set last month. The main difference to note in this run was his use of the Poltergust 4000, or Polt for short. This car isn't seen a lot in world record runs due to its weird set of stats, but in this category, Taiga adapted to its mechanics and shaved a sizable amount off the record. Huge congratulations to Taiga for your monumental work on Wario Stadium. Last month, I covered Dasher and Taiga's intense rivalry on Desert Hills Fast Lap PRB, which ended with Dasher scoring the first ever sub 21 second lap with a time of 20.974. This seemed like the natural end to the little back and forth him and Taiga were having, breaking 0.1 second barriers, but now a whole second barrier had been smashed and it was time to put the game to rest, right? Well, Taiga certainly didn't think so, and on May 15th, he broke yet another 0.1 barrier with a time of 20.894, an 80 millisecond improvement. This run was pretty similar to Dasher's run until the jump over the hills. Upon landing on the track from the first room, he gets an extra bounce which sends the car upwards and forward. This bounce allowed Taiga to travel up the hill in front of him more and delay his second shroom until a bit later, which reduces the total time spent in the air and saves time overall. Now surely this is where the story ends, right? Right? Taiga may have demolished his record on Wario Stadium, but this time Dasher doled out the destruction with a run of 20.783, a 111 millisecond improvement. This is a truly remarkable record and likely a category killer for the foreseeable future. Dasher commented on this run, "Super good lap. Managed to go to the right of the pokey and get an almost perfect shroom on the same run. PRB part is probably improvable, but not by much. I don't think I'll go back to this. Good luck to Taiga." Let's break this down. These laps were driven with the Rob Standard cart, which is the fastest cart in the game to have 2 shrooms in time trials. The Rob Standard is also the hardest cart in the game to perform PRB driving for an extended time due to its strict boost length. To give an example, the PRB that we saw in Wario Stadium earlier was done with the Egg 1. Maintaining PRB with the Egg 1 requires you to charge a mini turbo every 67 frames, or about 1.1 seconds. The Rob Standard requires you to charge a mini turbo every 49 frames, or about 0.8 seconds. This may not seem like a lot, but it adds a great deal of difficulty to the run. Dasher mentioned going to the right of the pokey in his run. This is similar to the decision to drive inside the vine that we saw on the Sky Garden run from Boreas. It is a small optimization to the line which saves a bit of time if you have the speed to make it there in time and carefully space out your mini turbos to avoid crashing. It saves at most 2 or 3 frames, but on a category this optimized, even the small improvements are huge. But let's get into Dasher's second comment about the almost perfect shroom. Remember that bounce that Taiga got upon landing from his first shroom? Let's just say that Dasher got the God bounce. Taiga's bounce allowed him to skip driving up part of the hill, but Dasher's bounce sent him clean over the hill entirely. When chatting about this run later, he said that he had got the bounce a few times before, but never had it on a run that was fast enough, and he believes that the bounce probably has something to do with the position that the kart lands at. To illustrate how fast this bounce is, we can compare the speed that his kart was going. What we find is that the 20.783 run finishes with a speed nearly 50 kilometers per hour faster than Dasher's previous time. The super big bounce that Dasher got allowed him to shroom much later and not have to hop at the very end of the boost in order to preserve speed. Needless to say, this was an excellent run, and it's unclear if Taiga will challenge this further. Congrats to Dasher on... Oh wait, sorry. We are far from done on Desert Hills this month. May 14th, Taiga lowers Beta's 3-lap record by 2 milliseconds with a time of 109.779. But wait, the same day, he gets a more substantial cut of 130 milliseconds, bringing the time down to 109.649. So how is this possible? To begin, this is the PRB 3-lap, so using PRB driving to go to the left of the pyramid is permitted. Also note that the Yoshi standard kart is used instead of Rob standard. This does lose a bit of time due to the slower top speed, but more than makes up for it later in the run. The driving up to the first shroom is pretty similar to the fast laps we were just looking at, but instead of jumping to the right and using a second shroom, runners jump further to the left, which allows the kart to land into a clean slide to end the lap. Note how he holds the mini turbo for a little bit before releasing. This is so he doesn't go into the sand and he has enough room to do an empty in the opposite direction right after. On lap 2, much is the same since you no longer have PRB, so you have to stay on the track. To save time here, you have to drive as close to the sand as possible without hitting it. I know from experience that staying tight and not getting bogged down by the sand is pretty challenging. The shroom on lap 2 is the exact same as lap 1, and Taiga closes lap 2 with an impressive sub-23 split. Taiga drives lap 3 very close to how he drove on lap 2, getting awfully close to a pokey before the shroom section. But wait, we don't have any shrooms this time. I guess we're gonna have to take the long route. This is where the better turning and maneuverability of the Yoshi standard kart plays in. To navigate back and forth through these hills quickly, a quick mini turbo is performed and then Taiga steers the kart around the turn before doing the same thing in the opposite direction. After the second turn and a quick MT, we're in the same spot that we land from the shroom, and now it's just a race to the finish. Pretty great improvement from Taiga, but it would once again be Dasher who had the last laugh here. 9 days later, Dasher cut a substantial 274 milliseconds off the record with a time of 109.375. This run uses the standard Luigi kart instead of Yoshi's, which is a bit faster but sacrifices some handling. Dasher takes advantage of the higher speed on the first 2 shroom laps, entering lap 3 a whole 320 milliseconds ahead of Taiga. The 46 milliseconds he lost to Taiga on lap 3 can likely be attributed to the poorer steering of the kart he was using, but even then, he drove those final turns phenomenally. On the run, he simply comments, "Standard Luigi strikes back." Now, it's uncertain if Dasher or Taiga will choose to continue with this record going forward, but we can speculate. Taiga's best splits add up to a 109.278, and Dasher's add up to a 109.145. Or perhaps someone will be manly enough to play this track with Rob Standard and push it to 108. Well, no matter what happens, there were some great records set here this month, and Taiga and Dasher once again show us how talented they are. GG's. As we continue with this month's episode, I want to tell you all about the most unprecedented streak of world records we've seen from one player in nearly 15 years. In the span of just 60 hours, from noon on May 21st to midnight on May 23rd, Taiga set 9 world records across 5 different tracks. He started off this streak on GBA Luigi Circuit PRB, where he set a new fast lap record of 24.090, 22 milliseconds faster than the previous record set by Toa. The next morning, he would take a further 36 milliseconds off the time with a 24.064 flap. We're going to take a look at both runs to explain how Taiga was able to go so fast and see if a time under 24 seconds might be achievable. The lap is performed on lap 2, but since this is a PRB run, that means that each attempt must start with a lap of PRB driving. The two runs start to the right of the finish line so they can drive as little distance as possible. The gist of this run is to take the tightest turns possible around the corners without hitting walls while maintaining PRB and cutting out unnecessary turning. The dry bomber, or as we like to call it, the tank, has the most leniency when it comes to maintaining PRB. Right at the start of the run, Taiga gets very close to the corner of a wall. This will be the first of many close calls during this lap. All of the MTs performed in the lap are spaced perfectly so that the kart has to steer as little as possible, meaning more time at max speed. On the last hairpin turn, PRB is purposely lost by using a shroom, which boosts the tank off-road until Taiga returns to the track to perform one last MT as he hops across the line. The shroom is used instead of continuing to drive with PRB because it allows you to take a more direct line to the finish while moving at the speed of a boost. Okay, but how are we going to reach sub 24? Well, that's a really good question, and there are probably two answers. One option would be a switch to the Egg 1, a kart with higher speed but stricter handling and turning ability. The other possibility is somehow getting a wall clip to take a tighter line. Now I know hitting walls may seem like a bad thing, but if it's done perfectly, it allows your kart to turn tighter while maintaining your speed. The only issue is that you can't really plan or react to one, so they will likely remain TAS only. Only time will tell when the 24-second barrier gets broken. But anyways, back to Taiga's reign of terror. Just 23 minutes before he got his second lap improvement, Taiga posted a time of 1:13.505 for the 3-lap, a 103 millisecond improvement over the record that he set here in March. This time is ridiculous. Most of the top players I spoke to about this record said that the run seems almost inhuman in execution. This run is a lot more than just a fast lap but done 3 times over, and he takes a few different lines that are a bit safer, but by absolutely no means easy. One of Taiga's biggest strengths is how little hesitation he has on the final lap of amazing runs. Very few times has he ever resorted to using an easier strat just to maintain his pace. In this run, Taiga goes all in on lap 3, resulting in a split 90 milliseconds faster than his previous record and just frames off the fast lap that he set just hours earlier. Taiga is a step above the competition on this track, and his world record run this month is less than 0.3 seconds off the sum of best splits from the community. Congrats to Oh yeah, right, we're only a third of the way through his record spree. 2 hours after his world record on Luigi Circuit, he would get the Wario Stadium fast lap record that we looked at earlier. Then 4 hours later, he destroyed the 3-lap as well. Taiga went to bed for the night and woke up the next morning, and just 10 hours after his last record, he would post a dual world record on Figure 8 Circuit 3-lap PRB, where he beat his own 3-lap time by an astounding 198 milliseconds with a time of 1:11.625, and in the same run beat his fast lap record by 9 milliseconds with a final split of 23.769. Taiga was so efficient that he got 2 world records in the same run. Let's take a look at how. Taiga starts the race with 3 MTs before transitioning into a chain of LMTs around the first turn. He's able to drive through the grass because he has PRB throughout most of the entire run. While he's driving through the grass, he stays as close to the wall as possible without hitting it, which requires a great deal of control. Coming out of the first turn, we reach the straight where Taiga does some snaking while slowly moving to the right side of the road. He does this very well and cleanly transitions into the second turn of Figure 8 Circuit, using PRB to drive off-road at full speed. The second turn is slightly tighter than the first turn and is also sloped downhill, but is driven similarly to its counterpart. After a bonkers LMT, Taiga once again returns to the straight and continues to snake into a nearly identical lap 2. His driving on lap 2 was fantastic, and he set a new best split of 23.840. The first turn and the big straight of the final lap are exactly like what we've seen before, but now it's time to use the shroom. The second turn goes exactly as it has the first 2 laps, but instead, Taiga uses his shroom for the last part of the turn before progressing to the straight for the final time. Taiga hops across the right side of the finish line to close out a new best fast lap and his huge world record 3-lap run. Taiga truly showed off the new potential of Figure 8 circuit with this run and put himself even further ahead of any competition. For reference, the world record on this track remained at 1:11.951 for 8 years before Taiga chopped a third of a second off of it in just 8 months. He also achieved the best second lap and third lap in a run, and the only split that wasn't the best ever was an absolutely bonkers opener from the greatest of all time, TV1, driven back in 2010. Taiga would relax for a bit. Oh, wait, no. Just 3 hours later, Taiga posted a time of 1:28.017 on Mario Circuit non-shortcut. This was 261 milliseconds faster than the previous record he set in February, and is over 700 milliseconds faster than the next closest time. This record is quite impressive from Taiga, who seems to have made this category his flexing grounds. The run features even better and more consistent driving than his previous record here. He had 2 remarkably similar laps and then closed the run with a 29.0 split on lap 3, just missing out on a sub 128. Consider the following. Mario Circuit actually has 3 categories instead of 2, adding to the confusion. This run from Taiga features PRB driving, but is not the PRB record because it does not utilize the over-the-wall shortcut, which saves time over going around. This is why it's referred to as non-shortcut. 19 hours later, Taiga would finish his world record rampage on SNES Mario Circuit 1, where he would improve his own record on the PRB 3 lap by 42 milliseconds with a time of 37.548. Most of this run's time save comes from a faster lap 1, a lead he held on to for the rest of the run. In the description of his video, Taiga states that his best splits add up to a time of 37.337. Taiga has a pattern of getting records that no one really expects, so maybe we'll see a new record here in the not so distant future. This record also marked the end to the 60-hour Taiga mania, and world records would once again return to safe levels. For one day. So Dasher wasn't done on Desert Hills, and his comments on his new world record say it all. Non-PRB rule for Desert Hills. PRB racing may not be used to cut through the sand to the right of the trees or to the left of the pyramid, and must be lost after going over the little ridge. Decided to play a bit of non-PRB category for this track now that I've been playing it for the last few days. Got a 21.599 just 20 minutes before getting this time. Previous world record before that was a 21.699 by Toa. Always funny to see that the non-PRB category on this track uses PRB for longer than the PRB category. In total, Dasher saved 127 milliseconds over Toa's previous record and got a new time of 21.572. As for the strategies used in this lap, Dasher makes an interesting note about the pretty backwards nature of the rules for non-PRB driving on this track, and how PRB is actually allowed to a certain extent. This run isn't too different from the fast lap that he set in the PRB category, and even the shrooms at the end are the same. Unfortunately, he couldn't quite get the same insane bounce that he got in his previous record, but he still got a fantastic time. Now, it seems like getting a fast lap record this month is just giving everyone warning that you're going to be posting a 3-lap improvement the next day, and Dasher would do just that. Well, actually he would sneak in a cheeky 5 millisecond improvement that same day, but it wouldn't be until the next day where he would really crush the category. The next afternoon, Dasher would come back to get a more substantial cut and produced a 1:10.063 run. There was no fanfare yet though. There was a sub to achieve, and he went right back to work. A little over 2 hours later, he came back in a big way. 1:09.805, a 563 millisecond cut in one day. The non-PRB and PRB 3 laps for this track are actually the exact same strategy-wise past the jump in lap 1. So Dasher's extensive practice from playing the track for the past week really paid off. This run had a pretty nice lap 1, a decent lap 2, and an excellent lap 3. The best splits give a 1:09.607, but Dasher said he is more than satisfied with getting 4 for 4 Desert Hills record this month, and plans to play other tracks now. Huge congratulations to Dasher on his extensive list of world records this month, from Sky Garden to Desert Hills, truly showing off your continued strength as the world champion. Hey, remember Beta from all the way back near the beginning of this video? Yeah, the guy who got the Airship Fortress record, that's him. Well, he came back 10 days later after his last record and scored 2 new records on Cheep Cheep Beach. First, he improved his own fast lap record from 26.876 to 26.842, a cut of 34 milliseconds. This lap is done on lap 2 and starts at a specific time so that Beta can catch a certain optimal cycle later in the lap. Beta does a fast fall off the ramp and chains together some RMTs before purposely going to the left of the ramp. Because he started lap 2 at around 43 seconds on the timer and drove well to this point, the water is at its lowest point and can be crossed with just 1 mushroom. He follows this up with some tricky snaking on the beach and handily makes his way into the final jungle section for a nice lap. On his run, Beta commented, "Sub 800 possible, but it's hard because it starts on lap 2. Now, we know from experience this month that when a player gets a fast lap record, they're probably going to follow it up with a 3-lap improvement too. And that's exactly what Beta did the same day. A 138 millisecond improvement over the time he set in January, Beta delivered us a run of 122.723 in the non-PRB 3-lap category. Yeah, that's right, there's a PRB category for this track too, but I'll cover that later. This run is quite different from the fast lap, mainly due to the water cycles, so I'll do a brief overview. On lap 1, the water is receding, but it's still pretty deep, so the shroom is used to cut through as much of it as possible. From there, the run continues as normal, except that Beta doesn't hop to the finish because he's still got 2 more laps to drive. On lap 2, the water is a bit lower than it was on lap 1, but Beta doesn't have a shroom anymore, so he just drives through it. Even if the water slows the cart down a bit, it's still much faster than driving around. On the pace that Beta arrives on lap 3, the water is actually quite low, which means he has to drive through less of it at a reduced speed. This lap was very good. So good, in fact, that it was the new best split for that lap. Now, back to the PRB record that I was mentioning before. PRB can be performed by using the boost that the ramp gives you and driving off and maintaining it through the water without losing speed. Taking advantage of PRB driving on this track is very tricky, but it does save time over driving through the water without it. Currently, the PRB record sits at 122.570, set all the way back in 2012 by Topspin. At the time that this record was set, the non-PRB record was 123.282. But over the past 9 years, that time has been lowered to just 153 milliseconds behind the PRB record. Now the question stands, will this old record be bested? And will it be in PRB or non-PRB? None of us know the answer, but Beta sure has the most say in it, so GG's to him for this awesome improvement. I know this may seem hard to believe, but this next record is the last record set in May. We finally reached the end. On May 30th, Taiga beat his own record on GCN Luigi Circuit by 81 milliseconds with a time of 108.859. In this run, Taiga uses PRB to drive over the dirt behind the chomp, on the dirt of the hairpin turn, and on the grass before the last turn. The PRB down the hill is all about spacing between your mini turbos, while the PRB up the hill is all about ensuring the best line for the final turn. Whenever Taiga goes off one of the boosters, he doesn't hold a direction, so that when he lands, he does a spin landing. That's right, spin landings are back, and just like an Airship Fortress, they allow the cart to turn without losing an excessive amount of speed. This run was better than his previous record on all 3 laps. Under the run, Taiga left his best splits on each lap, 23.028, 22.920, and 22.716, which total up to 108.664. Knowing his best splits, we can tell that there's still a fair amount of improvement to be made here if he chooses to continue. Taiga's biggest struggle in this run is the last lap where the shroom is used. This run's shroom is 96 milliseconds off the best split and 50 milliseconds off his own best split. It's very possible that we might see a 108.7 run from Taiga in the future if he wants to pursue it. Absolutely massive congratulations to Taiga on his remarkable performance this month, setting 14 of the 28 records set this month and covering such a wide range of tracks. Well, I guess that's it for May 2021. A whole 28 world records were set this month, which is the most since July of 2014. It's so amazing to see the Mario Kart DS community so active and not just at a world record level either. There are more players submitting times and participating in community events every month this year, and it makes me and so many other players so happy to see our humble community take shape into something bigger. I'm very excited to see what new world records will be set in June, and I can't wait to share them all with you. But maybe not so many, guys. This script took 3 whole days to write. All records and the channels of the people who set them will be linked in the description for you to watch on your own. I'd also like to give some huge thanks to Quantum, Abel, and Peak Alex for their extensive help scripting and doing analysis for this video. I'd also like to thank MKDasher for his help in making MKDS recording tools more accessible and answering a few questions I had about his runs. Finally, I'd like to thank all my pals on the MKDS Network Discord server and others for motivating me to finish this video and make MKDS even better outside of the game. You all rock. And with that out of the way, if you liked the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. My name is Puddings. Have a great day, Carters.